total?
Yeah, let's get started here. Thanks for coming in, everybody from all over the country, maybe all over the world. I'm Sam Hoskins, and we got Sanjay Dhall this morning, and he is coming to us from Willow Run Airport outside of Detroit, Michigan. And having said all that, Sanjay, just go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you for doing these tours, because I can't tell you how helpful any one of them is, and the kind of tricks and all sorts of things that people have used that others may not. It's just been a fantastic opportunity to learn a lot more about building things, not just specifically about quickies. So I'm very grateful for all the forthcoming information from this this group. It's let me just also add that this group is a remarkably generous group of people, where trying to preserve and grow perhaps the tiniest group of airplanes, man-made flying machines, that probably the smallest set of them. And I certainly appreciate all sorts of generosity that I've experienced in terms of learning about how to do such things. So thank you for that. My name is Sanjay Dhall. I'll take a few minutes just to tell you my background and my intense passion for anything that flies, whether it's birds, insects, things that fly. Certainly are very exciting for me. The mechanics of it, the design of them is entirely something that obsesses my mind all the time. Growing up in India at the age of 5 or 6, we'd see every once a week or once a month on a Sunday morning a little yellow airplane flying above our house. And I think they used to use Piper Cubs in India for general aviation, and that was all they had. And I would look up at them and wonder about it. It's like you could not imagine as a kid growing up in a crowded neighborhood without too many means to imagine what the extent of how closely can you touch an airplane. The biggest thrill of my life was to have touched an airplane by hand, firsthand. And so it has always been a thrill to me when I can come right near an airplane. It's a remarkable thing. And any form, and the gradually getting closer and closer to it, to the middle of it, has been this life transforming experience for me in the last 5 or so decades. It's been a remarkable journey of going from absolutely cutting paper to make whatever you could imagine of that little yellow airplane that flew above your head, to try to mimic that, to get to a point of where you can sit in an airplane and fly it, and the one you built yourself. So it's been an extraordinary experience. And it began with building these paper cutouts, cardboard cutouts, model airplanes, where I had an allotment of one sheet of fake balsa wood for the entire summer, all through my childhood. That was my ration. And I used that to make things that would attempt to fly, not successfully. And then I started building rubber band powered and free flight airplanes, model airplanes, not ever knowing that I could actually, how close could you get to a real flying machine that you could sit inside? Never knew that could happen for me. And so when I arrived in the United States 3-4 decades ago and learned to fly radio controlled model airplanes, and I then made, in my very first year of employment in the United States, a trip to Oshkosh. It just broke open a new world for me, to see that not only can you touch an airplane, you can build one yourself. This was something I had never experienced in India and just saw right here in the United States. it has just been a mind-blowing experience ever since for me. And so the transition for me, as I started, I came here for graduate school, finished that, and started, spending all my money on model airplane fuel. And one day I drove to the nearby sand dunes on Lake Michigan and saw hang gliders. And so I got a hang glider, and I learned with great difficulty flying hang gliders. One day at the model airplane field, somebody landed an ultralight airplane. That led me to buy that ultralight airplane, and it was a Falcon ultralight, an Eagle ultralight. I have pictures once we may have a chance to look at them. So this ultralight landed in the model airplane field in about 50, 60 feet, and I did a show and tell and then took off again. And I just wanted to experience that. So I bought my buddy's, that was my model airplane buddy, I bought his ultralight. And I flew that for many years of, maybe 4 years of flying ultralights, all different times of the day, weekends, evenings. That led to, and then of course, it all came to a grinding halt when I got married. And for 10 years, I was completely dormant and away from airplanes. And then in the year 2001, kids were slightly out of diapers, and career was also out of diapers. And so I started to look at how I could get back into airplanes. And I located a Falcon ultralight that happened to be something I could do next after flying the Eagle ultralight. And the Falcon's actually sitting right here in my hangar. I'll just do a 360 in a moment and share that with you. But that was in the week of 9/11, 2001, is when I was about to take a trip to Santa Fe to get this. I did make that trip a few weeks later, and bringing that back in an open door U-Haul truck was an experience of its own. Anyway, I flew those for a while. In each of these, I had many engine outs. On the Eagle ultralight, I had about 3 or 4 engine outs, where you had to put it down anywhere you could. And even with the Falcon ultralight, which has a 20 horsepower, 25 horsepower, two-stroke engine. And I started to feel that there must be more reliable ways to fly. And I started going back to Oshkosh, and I started seeing, and like I mentioned to you, that unique flying machines have always attracted me. And obviously coming across the Quickie, kind of for me, that was the most unique machine I had ever seen, with tiny little wings and could carry 2 people and go really fast. And it was an extraordinarily different kind of machine, which required a whole different way of thinking. And so I definitely wanted to build it. So in 2009, I started looking for any way I could buy a ready-to-go Quickie. And I saw ads on Barnstormers and elsewhere for, I think, Ernie Martin's beautiful Quickie. And I said, wow, that is a fantastic looking machine. I want to buy that, except, I didn't. And I sort of still had a feeling that maybe if these are home built, it would be great to build one oneself. And of course, but there were no kits at that time. The company was out of business for 30 some years. So I actually, in 2009, I came across a partially started Quickie. It was set up as a Q2 for a VW engine. The person had started it back in the late 70s and abandoned, I think, in 80 or 81, or whenever the LS Canard came out, that revision to the design. So I actually bought that, pieces of that and the unfinished work there, and I brought it home. Now I had no pilot's license, At the time, I had flown ultralights for many hundreds of hours, but I had no um, legal pilot's license to fly that with. So shortly after starting to build the Quickie, I started, I bought the Cessna 150, and within the next couple of months, I got myself a pilot license so that I could ultimately fly the Quickie. So in 2010, I had the pilot's license. I completed the Quickie with a lot of help from so many of you. Um, um, and finally, in 2011, in June of 2011, I completed it. And now that, obviously, I kept in close touch with you, Sam, as well as with Paul Fisher. Between 2009 and 2011, in those 2 years, I attended every gathering I could imagine getting to by driving there with Jerry Brinkerhoff in his car. And we would go on these long, long trips to Beatrice, Nebraska, and Decorah, Iowa, and so on, and trying to take as many pictures, to try to ask as many questions to learn about this very unique machine. So so back on, on the first, once this thing was set up, I was not comfortable flying it. I put in many dozen hours of taxiing it, and but to imagine that a machine with such tiny wings could actually get off the ground still sort of bothered me. And so, I was at one of the gatherings, I think it was Beatrice, Nebraska, where Sam, you gave me my first ride. And that shook me up. I mean, the takeoff acceleration was enough to get your endorphins going. And so I remember that experience and the, just the rush that I experienced on that flight. Later then, about a few months after that, now this was when I was 2 months from maybe test flying this myself, the first flight. On the way back from Decorah, Iowa, we stopped at Paul's hangar in Davenport, and Paul took me for some flights and touch and goes where he would help me understand what the approach looked like. It was immensely valuable to me to have gone through that experience, because I could feel firsthand that yes, I may be able to do this. A week before that, I attempted the first flight. I was talking to you, Sam, and I couldn't look over the top of the cowling to see where I was going, and that was a very foreign feeling to me. I had gone through 7 hours of tail wheel experience on a Citabria, but with the there, of course, the tail lifts up pretty quickly. Here it wasn't that, I couldn't see across the front that readily. So Sam actually suggested that for that reason, as well as for better control on the ground, to actually cut the tail wheel and install it so that it was much higher. And I did that, and I have kept the plane in that with that tail wheel position. I made a couple of mistakes with that. I will share that with you. But I did set it up at a much taller, set the tail wheel much further away from the fuselage, so that it gave me a slightly more favorable forward view. That helped somewhat. And of course, then one day when it was really calm, and I sought out every single. I really got weak-kneed, and I thought I was going to abandon this thing. I could not fly it myself. I was truly, mortally afraid for a few moments. I asked every experienced pilot in my EAA chapter to see if they would test fly it for me, but everybody kept, a 10-foot pole distance away from this airplane, and so I had no choice. I got some inspiring words from you, Sam, a few days before that flight, and And so one day when the weather was really calm, late evening, I made that first flight, and it just changed my life in many ways. Just, it opens up a new dimension to you that you can't experience any other way. And I'm not referring to opening it up for flight. I had been flying other airplanes, but the fact that something that you have built has all of those capabilities to fight off and sustain the laws of physics, to make it fly in a way that you can depend on. Anyway, that flight that was the first flight. Since then, I have about 250 hours on this machine. I have somewhat slowed in the recent years as I have been going even further into the center of the circle of aviation, if you can call it that, in attempting to build something that of my own design, that I want to be able to fly soon. Along the way, I also wanted to get something for my whole family to fly in, and so I actually also, 3 or 4 years after the Quickie, I also got a Velocity, the first generation Velocity, built in 1993 or something about there. Haven't flown it, didn't fly it. It needed a lot of work and a lot of restoration. There was a lot of damage, so I've repaired all that. Anyways, let me, okay, perhaps I can share with you one of the scary stories with this Quickie. About 20 hours into it, by the way, this is the 10th year. I flew exactly 10 years ago in June for the first time. So about 20 hours into that, which was in November of 2011, I flew to an airport nearby, Adrian Airport. And while landing at that airport, I had never experienced this before. And there was a bunch of birds. There was a flock of birds. This is live, so there was a flock of birds, thousands of birds just sitting on the runway, and I got totally distracted by it. So my hand-eye coordination wasn't that great in that moment. I may have been 5, 7, 8 feet above the ground and just staring at the birds right in front of me. And I kept slowing the plane down. And I found that, I'd slowed it down too much. And I kind of dropped it from 6 feet, or I don't recall now exactly how high I was. But that was a very scary experience, in that suddenly I felt vibration in my plane. Now I had been practicing, bounced landings, and every time I encountered, any bounce at all, I would go around. This is, I think, the advice of many of you. Jim Patillo was also mentioning that, and I tried to follow that to the T. Now this thing was shaking, and I didn't know why. But since I had bounced the plane, I was back up in the air and wasn't sure I could put it back down easily. I actually went around and I did this skimming the trees pattern to put it down, this shaking thing, and pulled it into the ramp, and discovered that one of the prop tips had 2 inches missing on the end, and the blade was splintered. And it was a good test in a way on the whole airplane. Of course, I was, that was a scariest experience I've had with the Quickie. Engine didn't quit; it kept going. And now here I was at an airport. So anyway, I called on the, on my friends I know here on the Quickie list, and Paul Fisher said, "I'll go to the airport and I'll take the propeller off my Quickie, put it in a FedEx package and send it to you. It'll be there." I said, "Wait, Paul, thank you, but this is the kind of generosity I've experienced with this group, where you take things off your well, people take shirts off their back. By the way, here's a shirt that belongs to Paul Fisher. It has Paul Fisher's color scheme on it that Paul gave me off his back. Thank you, Paul. But next day I kept making calls and emails, and I found Bart Fisher, who was another TriQ owner in Ann Arbor, 20 miles from me. And he had just received from Sturba a brand new propeller. It was a 60 by 70. It was a slightly higher pitch than I was using. And he brought it over to me. And he brought me a dial gauge to check the prop flange, to make sure it was before putting the propeller on, that the propeller and the crankshaft was straight. And we went, I went through that whole experience. But I keep finding the generosity of this group, where they give you things in a moment of need to just get you back in the air. Much appreciated. I couldn't, build such, and keep. So I felt it as a valuable contribution for me to share what crude construction I have done here. And you're welcome to get a look at this. So when I did my first flight, as you know, I'd been flying ultralight airplanes for some time, but I only had 70 hours on my pilot's license. This includes dual time, ground instructions. I actually had only about 37 hours of actual solo flying time on the Cessna 150. And I made that first flight thanks to the introductions by so many of you. And I've continued flying it since, and I've added 250 more hours. So let me take you through some of the details and some of the changes or modifications I may have made. But all right, I'm switching here to. So let's see. Obviously the one change I always like to see is a good smooth round. So I enjoyed putting the winglet on this thing. I enjoyed building, many of the rounds on the, just whatever blends I could make that made it feel, nice and aerodynamic. The wheel pants I actually widened by about 5/8 of an inch to ensure that my tires wouldn't bind in there for whatever reason. I actually moved the wheel pant hinge the main gear wheels forward by about 3/4 of an inch, and also down by about 3/4 of an inch. As a safety, I kept fearing that with a heavier engine and a lighter pilot, that I might want to have just a little extra. Oh, and moving the axle down by about 3/4 of an inch, again for prop clearance reasons, just to give myself a little more confidence. Few other things just while we're at this wheel pant is that one of the things that, there's the hydraulic brakes, but one of the things I did was to put a sleeve in there, which of a bigger tube, a nylon tube, into which passes the Nyloflow tubing itself that feeds the brake fluid, as a way of being able to maintain it and slide it completely out all the way to the source in the fuselage. It's just a small mod.
That's
Recently, after
very
watching,
good mod.
Yeah, that allows me to be able to go without having to tear into the wheel pant. Lately, I've been feeling that my speed numbers may be a touch higher than they should be. So, on a recent, I think Jerry's a recent Q tour showed actually where he had, this acrylic that he was using to tune the static port. And since I ended up mounting my static port about too far forward, where it does come close to the prop blast, I was sort of not sure, because on a Cessna 150, it's right up there, very near the cowling. In any case, I'm not exactly sure of, it does show a slightly lower pressure as a result of very fast air moving past it. So I attempted, based on looking at Jerry's Q tour, that there may be the possibility of trying to tune the static pressure there at the static port. All right, what else? The changes at the tail wheel were the ones that I was talking about. Initially, the tail wheel came straight out of the spring, so it was along a straight line. I had 3 or 4 days, a week before the first flight, I added a giant spacer, which is now, I removed it about 6 months ago, in favor of just this small triangle that's left here, as a way of maybe flying a knot faster. I'm not sure, but the tail wheel did stick out into the airstream much more. It had about a 4-inch spacer here, and the wheel pointed much further down at a much steeper angle. I could show you some pictures, but we don't have time for that right this moment. So let's just keep going. I've kept the conventional plans-based arrangement of the rudder pedal going to the tail wheel, and tail wheel connecting up to the rudder. So that's one. Let's see inside.
Do you have differential brakes, Sanjay?
I do have differential brakes. So if you can, I'm really embarrassed to show you my rudder pedals. They've got some duct tape holding a block of wood there, because when I set it up, I just didn't want to go back in there to adjust the heights of the brake cylinders, the master cylinder. So it does have differential brakes. These are actually hyper rudder pedals that I found in another airplane, and I lifted it off of them and put them in here. And I mounted it on a platform. As you see, this platform can be adjusted. It is in its forwardmost position. And in any case, that and so the pedals on the left have brakes in them. The pedals on the right do not. There you can see them there. You can see the counterweight on the elevator. There's only one on the right, and the two connect. So, all right. Okay, let me open the engine. This is a cowling that I just made up. In fact, my son used to call this airplane made from pizza boxes, because I used pizza boxes as spacers in creating the mold for making this cowling. You know, started with, well, I just, you know, it was a mold, and so it didn't show up. The Little Caesars pizza boxes are no longer present in here. Anyway, the plenums were things I saw, I think, on several airplanes at the Field of Dreams in Nebraska. So they seem to be a very elegant solution rather than all the baffling, which I did incorporate. I don't have an oil cooler in this, and continue to work with the openings and the at the exit. So about 3 years into the flying, and I was seeing slightly elevated oil temperatures, I opened this the intakes by about a 1/2 inch radius. I think I went from about 4 inch to about 4 5/8 inch diameter openings at the inlets. Also, the cowl, I shaped the cowl so that it would work with the standard carburetor, the MA3 SPA carburetor. So I did shape the cowling. So I think it's a little more draggy, because the lowest portion of it goes down a tad more, maybe a 1/2 inch lower than the other the kit cowlings that for the Q-200. I did have to obviously make a lot of you know, it's going from a VW start to a O200 engine, there was obviously all sorts of changes to the firewall, as you know, and this, so it's that full original carburetor there. I've also made, the ramp at the bottom. This was some. So I've cut away maybe 2 inches from the exit end of the cowling there, and I saw Mike Dwyer had the simplest solution to building exhaust tubes by straight pipes. And people, when I fly over, tell me that this sounds more like a Harley motorcycle engine in the air with the separate sounds from each cylinder. Let's see. Let me go up to, yeah, here's my very luxurious interior.
Hey Sanjay, let's go back to the engine a little bit. We want to see the lower part of your cowling. All right.
Yes. Okay, so here you can see the standard carburetors there with no ducting. It's connected directly, and the cowling inside has a chute that comes up to it. Let me actually show you that. Here's the cowling, in which I've also added. I've changed many things about it, all in attempts to maintain cool engine. And you can see the ducting route is essentially incorporated into the cowling rather than into the engine. I recently, a few months back, felt I should set this up to fly at night as well. So I added these really nice Baja design LED lights that are both a landing light at a 7-degree cone angle, I think, and taxi lights, which are set at like 30 degrees. And both of them are incorporated into just these 4 very high intensity LEDs. Sam, was there more I should show you in here? It's fairly standard otherwise, standard magnetos.
Hey Sanjay, just one thing I'd like to mention on your engine cooling and your oil temperature. And I've seen this in a lot of different aircraft. Regarding your plenum, I think there's a benefit to having the plenum actually go over the backbone of the engine itself.
Yes,
you're not getting any cooling benefit, and you have all that all that metal there. You probably got a square foot of metal there, so you might want to.
That is correct. In fact, when I was reminded by watching Jerry's Q where he has it going straight across that tunnel is something that I'll one day like to add to this. That might distribute the.
All right, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off, Sanjay.
Okay, so basically, the plenum, I think one day I would like to go across it and kind of share across the cylinders, as well as gain a little bit of cooling capability of the case too. My engine doesn't have any oil temperature issues at all. I do see one of the back cylinders showing higher CHTs, this one here, that shows somewhat higher CHTs. And I have not figured it out, but I continue to, track it and try to look at all, solutions to that. So the instrument panel is very basic. I wanted to do a couple of things in my setup, basically that if I want to be able to fly, if there was a power issue, I want to be able to turn off the master switch and still be able to continue flight. As well as, second thing, I did not want to have any fuel related issues. I think power and fuel were to me critical safety things. And so I did something quite, what I thought was a major isolation. What I've added all around the fuel tank is around the entire circumference of the fuel tank, I separated out and removed all the foam and filled it with micro. That essentially there is a channel of micro all around the fuel tank, the main tank, that completely isolates any foam in the fuselage skin from the fuel tank bottom and the fuselage side. And then it's of course covered in glass again. But by doing that, I somehow mentally felt that you have separated, you've put an actual wall made of, epoxy and micro that would keep any fuel ever seeping anywhere into the structure. Similarly, I went back after some years of flying, doing, and added this opening at the top and added a few more layers of glass inside the header tank through this opening. And I now have access should I need to get to the header tank. Some of the simple mods that included this fuel filler cap. Once again, Sam, I don't know if you can see this with the sunlight. There you are. This is basically a PVC fitting, which was open at the top, where I put a 60 thousandths aluminum underneath it and then floxed over it, and that becomes a very airtight cap, so there is no venting through it. So this is a ventless cap that, of course, we all want because there is a low pressure on this side here. In the back, I carry right here on the floor, I carry 25 pounds of lead. I'm a somewhat lighter pilot, and I carry this 25 pounds of lead just to keep the CG just a little bit better. And I have actually in the very back, let me use a flashlight here. In the very back, I don't know if, so I have a battery that's in the tail cone, and behind the battery at the very tail cone, where I have about 14 pounds of lead that is permanently screwed in there at the tail wheel, just inboard of the tail spring. Hard to see, but there are two bolts there that hold down some lead plates. I had some trouble with my radio stuff for many years, and I traced it to my antenna in the vertical fin. So I abandoned that and installed this Archer antenna. I don't know if you can see that in this picture very. The Archer antenna goes kind of, and you have to kind of tune its position. Yeah, so that's the other thing. Let's see.
Sanjay, what's that
Yes.
ball back behind the pilot, like passenger seat?
This here?
No.
This is the
behind the seat.
There's behind the seat.
What is that thing?
This thing here is a tire. It's a spare tire I carry with me. I've had a couple of flat tires on the taxiways. That's that's just a spare lamb tire.
Okay.
With a tire tube in it and a bottle of talc that's in there. Yeah, that's just a tire, and I just and a canopy cover, and that's it, and a couple of tools in here. A GPS antenna for the ADSB. I wanted to set this so that it's okay for me to get into the plane by just sticking my leg over it. I wanted to put in a naval type ladder here that you could unfurl out and have it hang over the edge here. That anybody could step into and get into the. Well, I never did make that ladder, but I ended up using this opening that I created to mount an ADSB out and in setup. It's a Avionics thing, because we are right under the Class B Detroit Airport airspace, so you couldn't do without an ADSB out. So I ended up using that space in the right armrest. Okay, well, what else might I point you to? It's
Let's have an
very
overall.
basic setup.
Let's have an overall view of your instrument panel here.
Yeah. So one of the things that I, you know, there's a basic instruments on the left. This radio is defunct. I need to take it out at some point. The transponder. By the way, one very valuable addition was a suggestion from Mike Dwyer. Is this carb temperature gauge? That has been a wonderful addition. I would often wonder about any carb icing. It is something that would always concern me living in Michigan, etc. So I actually installed. I think Mike had an email explaining how to do it, and I followed his instructions and put in a probe that goes to the carb. There's the there's the probe right here that coming from the carb that picks up the cylinder. I mean the carburetor temperature, and saves me the hassle of figuring out if it's icing or not. So what else? Yeah, the other thing is that this tablet for me is it's just a stick-on. It's held with Velcro. I charge it at home. I bring it here. It has all the ADSB stuff, weather and all, and I just stick it with Velcro. And when it's time, I can charge it in other ways or charge it right from here. And I use that. I mean, that's my general guide to getting anywhere. I didn't have any room for a cylinder and EGT gauge, so I just stuck a paint stirring stick and have put it on this for now. This is not an example of great workmanship, but it's very functional for the time I've devoted to it. What else? The switches are very basic and nothing extraordinary there. No electronics of any kind. Yeah, I think that about does it in terms of. I just recently added a lock, in the hope of flying and to something other than a Quickie event where there is some indoor hangars to put the Quickies in. So I'm now basically gradually getting this airplane to a more travel-friendly thing. I had never used airplanes to go anywhere. I was just puttering around in the sky and enjoying the view. Looking at the occasional red barn and the grain silos, and that gave me enough satisfaction from flying. At the recent Decora gathering where Jay was there, I was looking at his pretty airplane and with all kinds of enhancements done to it, all sorts of features. And I just saw this kind of light, and I just copied that and installed it. It's an Avio all-in-one kind of nav light strobe with wig-wag and all that normal new stuff. So what else? Do have the reflexor. The reflexor and speed brake or belly brake is here. Built plans like. Also the same with the reflexor.
And which style of reflexor do you have?
It's the round with the offset oval. It's on the other side of. Okay,
the factory reflexor.
Yes. Okay. Yes, with the it's the factory one. Yes. Yeah. I don't know where I got those parts from. But...
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, if anybody wants to know, they can look that up.
Yeah, it's the factory one, and you just that cable and that suffices for. Right. I wish I could go back behind them, but I didn't open the back cone, so. Yeah.
So Sanjay, I got a little question. I'm just curious about your, you have a lot of lead in there. You got the, what, 25 pounds you said behind the passenger and then another 17 in the
Yeah.
tail. Now,
Yes.
why
14.
did you, why did you decide that you needed all that?
Well, I weigh about 130 some pounds. That was one thing. I felt that when I was test flying it, I wanted to basically make sure I was maybe closer to the center of the CG envelope rather than too close to any one edge. And in its without those things, I would be closer to the front edge of the envelope. Although obviously that is safer, but I didn't want the in a tail dragger, any tipping over or anything like that. It's just it's one of those psychological things. It may not be necessary at all.
Okay, I was just wondering if you based it on your weight and balance calculations.
It was based on weight and balance for sure. Yeah, it was. The empty weight was 672 before I had, and then I put 14 pounds in that tail, just to assure me that that I was at least for the first set of flights, I was in the middle of the envelope. Okay. I imagined that one day I would go back and remove them, but instead I've actually continued flying, in the same way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to unmute everybody and open it up for questions. How many people have you given rides to, Sanjay?
0. I'm I'm afraid I'm only now getting to the point that I feel, I think with these tail wheel changes, the most recent tail wheel change is a better change where it's I believe I had made a mistake in making it a positive caster, which was a problem. And the hinge of the tail wheel, was lagging, and I've now changed it back to just leading slightly, which does help the steering a bit better. I have not given not a single ride yet. I for some reason just haven't, and it's almost like every time I fly, because I've been not flying it quite as much as I would like to. If I was a regular many days a week kind of flyer, I would be, but every time there is a tad bit of, all right, let me go out and fly again before I consider other people. So it's,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've just not done it, but I think I'm approaching the point where now I'm feeling more comfortable. But by the way, this is another of the, this II that I've borrowed from Mr. Paul Fisher, which of course stands for implemented imperfection, which sums up all the paint runs and all the, but I appreciate that there's something to be said for just building it despite seeking, waiting around to make everything just so.
Yeah, did you notice any radio static with your automotive landing light?
No, I tested many lights before finding this one that does not have any radio static. The Baja design lights are actually being used by a lot of these RV guys also for that reason. This is a really, I tested about 4 other high intensity LED lights that were cheaper, but in the end, they all produced huge amounts of radio static. What this particular one, I think this is in fact, this is what it was. It's called Squadron Pro, and it actually does a superb job. No static at all. As long as the voltage stays above 13, it so with on a straight battery, it may produce a little static, but above, I think maybe 12.5 volts even. It works just fine without any static.
That's a great report. I would like for you to post the specs for those. I've gone through the process of finding cheap landing lights and have resorted to.
Here it is. Quadrant Pro. It's fantastic. It does. It solves the problems of LED lights and you know, then of course there's just a matter of molding it into the cowling, if that's, or wherever you want to put it, of course. But they do
I had
work.
to resort to ripping out the internal electronics, the switching power supplies that were the source of all of the noise.
Exactly.
My own power supply.
Yes, exactly. That is it. It's that switching. It's that little chip that does the switching, and or in some cases not even a chip. It's something much cheaper. That's the more old-fashioned step up voltage that it has to go through, or step down. Yeah. You know, in terms of, there was some question about overall speeds. You know, on that flight back, after I installed that, you know, I replaced that broken propeller, and I flew back from Adrian Airport, I was flying almost as fast as Sam does. I recorded at least that particular day. I had a good solid tailwind that got me back home fast. I flew to a much higher altitude, and I saw ground speeds of 232 miles per hour, which you know, couldn't be any, you know, I just wanted to get home, not knowing exactly if there was any damage to the engine, but I wanted to, at least I did all sorts of testing before leaving the other airport, but then shortly thereafter I had the engine rebuilt, where they found no damage whatsoever when they did them. You know, all the high-tech crack location with, you know, MagnaFlux and all those other things on the crank.
Sanjay, question: where is your where is your transponder antenna?
Good one. So it's in the back, way in the back. Transponder antenna is actually way in the back. Do you see it behind the battery? It's mounted on a little plane, aluminum plane that sits up about 4 or 5 inches off the belly, inside skin, and pointing down.
Okay, so it's kind of a standard little.
Yeah. It's just a tiny 2.5 inch antenna pointing down.
All right, got another question here. What are your reflexor habits? When do you use your reflexor?
So at takeoff, I use I basically am. This is the, you know, I have a little line here for takeoff and landings, which just pushes the tail. So let's see. So that's approximately takeoff and landing reflex. You can see it's about 2-3 degrees trailing edge up on the aileron, and then when I'm within, just as I leave the ground and it starts, you know, it climbs quite rapidly. So I go to the full down position really after that, and I never have to. After that, I don't have to use the elevator or the trim wheel. I have a trim wheel here for holding the elevator in position, but I don't find myself lately using that. So in its cruise position, it's about 3 degrees or 4 degrees down trailing edge.
So would you say that was half of the travel of the reflexor knob that you use for landing?
Let me see. Yeah, it's half. It's less. Yeah, it's about here. So it's about here, and it can go up to there. So about, I think maybe there is total of 6 degrees. So now I use about 3 on landing. No reason why. I just, you know, I started there, and it just works fine for where it's almost a where the tail wheel barely lifts off the ground. and the main wheels also come off. I mean, if you wanted to do the traditional kind of tail wheel takeoffs where you're flying on or you're running down the runway on the mains for a tad bit longer with the plane flying level, I don't generally do that. I just let it get off the ground first and then continue close to the runway for another bit longer. That also helps me with the cylinder temps not rising too sharply if I if they are. So but yeah, it's a very here you can see a very Spartan interior, just a foam and a headrest from an abandoned couch. And I have a very luxurious passenger seat. It's rolled up in another piece of foam. So, or a yoga mat would work. I think, Sam, in your airplane, I think I saw a yoga mat.
Well, they're camping. They're Walmart camping mats.
There you go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah. Let me just walk around.
What's your propeller now, Sanjay?
It's a 60 by 70. It used to be a 60-68, which I thought gave me slightly better performance. And I typically cruise around at 2400 RPM, and I see about maybe at when flying to Decorah last year, I remember my typical speeds were like 167, give or take, at 2400 or so RPM at 6,000-7,000 feet, something like that. And so so I'm finding that at 24 I get about on close to the ground. I see at 24 I see 150 miles per hour. At 2,500 RPM I see another 10 miles. At 26 another 10, and at 2,700 RPM I see about 175, 180, something 175, 180. Yeah, that's about what it is.
But you can also watch your fuel gauge go down at the same time.
The which gauge?
The fuel gauge, if you're up to 27.
The fuel gauge, yes, absolutely. And I, and guess what? I keep my fuel gauge disconnected. I'm mostly looking at, I have fairly good estimate of how long these 15.5 gallons in the main tank last. And I'm only concerned about if there's not enough fuel to get to the header. And from that point, I have 45 minutes. That's really what, other than that, I think 5.5 gallons per hour is typical at 2,400 RPM.
Well, that's a novel way of not having to worry about how much fuel you have left.
Yeah, I just check it on the ground every now and then, but that's about it. I question my, a resistive type probe that's in the fuel gauge. I just don't want any power to it, period. I just don't like mixing fuel and power. Not with the resistive type. If it was the capacitive type, it would be different. But that's what I ended up back then installing, and that's what stayed. So,
how deep do the landing lights you've got in your caroling? How deep into the caroling do they come? Are they flush virtually, or?
Oh, the landing lights. Okay, so let's see. It's set at a 7-degree angle. It's about I think this is about 3¼ inches deep. It's my third digit here. Yeah. And about the same dimensions all around. It's a cube, more or less. And it's set at about a few degrees down. So 2 degrees down from when the tail wheel is down.
Right.
Sanjay,
is it just the one that, yeah?
Sanjay, have you actually flown at night?
Yes, I have. Well, I guess night as in late twilight. Yes. And that's when I remember, then I realized I couldn't read my instruments. So I had to install this. This is, as you know, from a headband. It's that light on a headband, and in order to see, now I have the red LED on. So this is the front of the dollar store, actually. But this works really well for lighting up the instruments just enough that they don't distract, but they become visible again. Yeah. I didn't realize I would need that till I was actually in it. I think these, I don't know if these are helping or hurting right now, but yeah, there's one Saturday, it's just haven't taken.
What's the consensus on the 4-to-1 versus 2-to-1 individual exhaust?
Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? I would imagine that at least from a back pressure standpoint, there may be some advantage to merging some exhausts so that there is some pressure equalization. With this, you don't have that. So, but it's a simple implementation, and at least with this individual setup, there's not a this is not, that they're all completely straight pipes each. No, isn't 2-to-1 per side, in other words, that
Klaus Savier told me one time that 4-to-1 is the absolute worst you can have. A crossover is very good, except that it takes a lot of space and a lot of pipes.
Yes.
The next best and the best is being straight pipes.
Okay, so
properly.
Really?
Now,
that's
you have straight pipes, and I'd like to know is how do you have them supported? Because I tried to make straight pipes at one time, and there was so much vibration they broke, and I even had a resulting in-flight emergency because of it.
Oh, really? Yeah, I do recall. Nothing really. Actually, they're just this, just a good flange weld, and there is no joints anywhere else. It's just
are they supported near the firewall? Have any extra support?
No, they're not.
Not.
No, they're not. But the only thing is they're stabilized by each other. So for example, here is a heat muff, and that heat muff has the steel wire that wraps on both of the exhausts. I don't know if you can see that here. Let me turn on. Let me 1 second. Let me bring the flashlight here. Yeah, it's quite bright and sunny just now. Yeah, so
You can see it if you know what you're
looking
looking for, Sanjay. The focus is out right now.
So
Stop right there.
Yeah, there's a spring that's wrapped on both the pipes together, so it kind of keeps it somewhat stabilized. And then this stainless steel shield on that whole thing kind of roughly supports it. But I did once have a camera I had placed on the wheel pant there, looking straight at the engine, and I could see vibration on these pipes. In fact, that's why I thought I should put some more wire, but that doesn't do anything at all. It's just there, and I never took it out.
Well, it helps reduce the vibration.
It might, but it hasn't. It seems that when I watched the video again after putting those on, they seem to just keep doing what they do. It's the same thing here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's completely free, really. And yeah.
So do other people on the call agree through research or actual testing that the individual runners is the high performance way to go?
Can you repeat the question?
So it sounded like 4-to-1 was better than the straight pipes.
No,
And
4-to-1's
2-to-1 was
worse.
not a good. Yeah, that's what I heard, according to Javier.
I was asking if other folks on the call through research or testing agree that the individual exhaust pipes was the high performance way to go.
Well, the only other person I know who has experience with these also is Mike Dwyer, as I recall. It's where I saw them. Anybody else in this group have straight pipes?
I got 2 into 1.
Yeah, I got 2 into 1.
Yeah, I have 2 into 1 on each side on mine, but it's not my first choice. But like I said, I had a in-flight emergency where a unsupported pipe broke and I couldn't figure out a good way to support them properly. So I went back to my old 2 to 1 in the name of safety.
Has anybody got mufflers on theirs or silencers or anything?
The only guy I ever knew had a muffler on it was Larry Couch, and he was trying to get augmented exhaust or whatever you want to call it to get more thrust out of it. And he passed away before he got it done, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what these bankers say, noisy pipe saves lives, so might be the same for us.
Well, gang, we really are out of time this time.
Yeah.
So
When are you gonna have the velocity done?
It's ready. It's ready. I just I broke a light on it as I was walking past it. So
Oh.
but that was it. It's otherwise it's good to go. I was just testing its retracts the other day, but yeah. Well, I have other projects, as you know, and
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
occupying my. It's this beast over here, which is the destroyed one.
Okay.
So.
All right, Sanjay, this is it. So
Yeah.
I
Hey,
want to
Sam.
thank you very much
Sanjay.
for doing this. Like as per usual, it'll take a couple of days. We'll get it uploaded, cleaned up a little bit and uploaded.
Yeah, clean that joke out of there.
Yeah, it's already gone, Kevin. It's already gone.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you next time, okay?
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sanjay.
Thanks,
Nice
guys.
airplane,
guys.
Sanjay.
Thank you for doing these. Sam,
Bye-bye.
Paul. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.